Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to this second installment of the Racial Reckoning series brought to you by the MMCA here on the BIPOC Exchange. Last month, we kicked off the series by peeling back the veil of tokenism with diversity, equity, and inclusion experts and celebrity influencers in good DEI versus bad DEI and why it matters. Today in part two, we'll take a look at the lack of diversity in the tech industry and highlight Black innovators and disruptors who are breaking down barriers, pushing boundaries, and transforming the tech landscape with their ingenuity and creativity. I invite you to check out the bios of today's guest experts on the event meta page on the BIPOC Exchange. Now, to kick us off, I have the pleasure and good fortune to introduce my co-host for this discussion, 2022's Entrepreneur of the Year, and my friend, Tiffany Norwood, a technologist, innovator, futurist, and public speaker. Thank you, Tiffany, for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you so much, David. I'm so excited about the discussion that we're going to have today. It is my life, right? I'm a lifelong innovator, a lifelong frontier tech entrepreneur. And so I'm really excited to be here today to specifically talk about Black tech innovators and disruptors whose accomplishments shatter the myth of Black tech being something of the future versus something of the past. And we'll talk about that more. I can tell you as a lifelong technologist that there's many things in our everyday lives that we use that were invented by Black people. We'll today talk to Albert White about his book, Race for the Net, when African Americans controlled the internet and what happens now. And we'll also hear from Taylor James, Director of Research at The Plug, on whether tech companies are making good on their funding pledges to Black and Brown America. And she'll also give her insights on The Plug's recently released report, The Black Tech Effect. Again, it's not acknowledged enough the role that Black Americans play in shaping the world's technology. The caller ID came from a Black inventor. Traffic lights came from the creative minds of Black tech, as well as I'll add that laser cataract surgery, one of my favorite inventors, Patricia Bath, a Black woman, created and has 5 patents around laser cataract surgery. So today we're going to highlight some of the future-facing Black tech that's out there, including the next generation of blockchain technology, driving cryptocurrency, and the next wave of banking, as well as we'll be hearing from the media content, what the media content will look like in the future, and the digital ecosystems that are creating communities, facilitating information highways that will deliver these resources to small businesses and help them thrive.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Super excited about this, Tiffany. So I'd like to kick off, right? You've really been forging a path forward since you graduated from Harvard Business School as the first Black woman ever recognized as Cornell University's Entrepreneur of the Year. You have a laundry list of accomplishments. You've led over 8 startup companies. You helped build the first ever global digital radio platform, including XM Radio. You filed your first patent at the age of 19. And I have to say, as a fellow Cornell who have that in common, where you've studied economics, computer science, and statistics. So you're just like killing it everywhere. So my question is, how are you channeling all of these disciplines and areas of interest into your companies that marry technology, music, video, and animation to teach entrepreneurship, innovation, and what you call practical creativity?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've had such a journey, and I hope my journey can be inspiration for other people that are interested in tech, Blacks, women, Black women. So as you mentioned, I first started my journey actually before business school. I started teaching myself to code in the 70s using a book, paper, and pencil. And a lot of people are surprised by that. But yeah, you don't need a computer to teach yourself to code. You just don't know if you're right unless we have a computer. And from that journey of teaching myself to code, I licensed my first software code 30 years ago in 1992 while working on Wall Street, and then did a number of startups. I'm actually on my 7th, 8th, and 9th startup right now. But the biggest of which has been the satellite radio startup WorldSpace, of which XM Radio was our North American play, but we did launch the first global satellite radio platform. I don't know if we were the first radio platform ever. So it's been a really exciting ride. And one of the reasons why I wanted to be here today was that for me, I know that the skill sets and the mindsets that I cultivated along the way, being an entrepreneur, being an innovator, are skill sets and mindsets that I think are important in everyday life. They're the skill sets and mindsets of being self-made. They're the skill sets and mindsets of agency. And I call it practical creativity because you're basically creating alternate realities, new technologies, new products, new outcomes. It's the same skill sets that allow people to be the first of their family to go to school, right? Or to get a university degree. And it goes around persuasive storytelling and cultivating endurance and cultivating optimism, right? And those types of mindsets and skill sets, how to have high impact collaboration. So one of my companies, Tibetan, is focused on that, teaching everyone how to be innovative and entrepreneurial. And then the other two are in the esports and age tech space. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. And I cannot wait to hear more about what everyone else is doing and thinking of, because I mean, I'm old, right, David? So I could talk forever, and I don't want to. So with that, I'd like to start by introducing Dante Simpson, the co-founder and CEO of eSpat TV. Like, how do I say that, Dante? Is it
you nailed it? Usually people say SPAT, so you absolutely nailed it. It's eSpat, eSpat TV.
Yes. Great. And you've translated your background in marketing and brand building, working at the highest levels of entertainment, fashion, Sony Music Entertainment, the Gucci Group. Love Gucci, by the way. If you ever want to send any samples my way, I will give you my address right after.
I'm everybody's favorite Santa Claus, Tiffany, I promise.
Yeah. And you're mine now, too. And you've created a company that links esports, pixels, and technology. Part of the reason why I got eSpat pronunciation right is because I'm in esports, right?
Correct.
So what was the idea behind this venture, and what is the need eSpat has been filling when you conceived the idea with your co-founders? Just tell us a bit more about the origin story.
Yeah, absolutely. We were inspired by two people. I always tell this story. One day this story is going to get back to this first gentleman. I'm certain of it. There was a moment, and I promise, if you've ever heard me talk, you hear me say this all the time. There was a moment on the BET stage. They were giving a Lifetime Achievement Award. And the gentleman who won the Lifetime Achievement Award, he said, everybody's fighting for a seat in Hollywood. I'm in Atlanta. I build my own table, and you're all welcome to join me. That moment changed my journey and perspective on things tremendously. Tyler Perry said that on that stage that day, and I'll never forget it. It's kind of my motto, and I kind of built upon what he said and kind of made it a mission for me within the gaming space. So I look at somebody like Stan Lee, the creator of Marvel. When he first started sketching Spider-Man, there's no way that he envisioned, the Avengers Endgame being $1 billion blockbuster on the big screen. Same with Iron Man, same with the Hulk, so on and so forth. We've all seen a lot of iterations of those shows, whether in comic and cartoon, on television, during our childhood, and obviously now on the big screen. I always asked, and have always asked, what happens when you translate that to gaming? There's tremendous gaming titles out there that deserve to live in that same space. Our journey began with creating trailers. for some of those big games in big moments. So think of Cyberpunk 2077 with Keanu Reeves. That was us. Free Fire with Cristiano Ronaldo. That was us. And a lot of those trailer moments bringing celebrity with game title, kind of meshing that under an umbrella. During the pandemic, we really got a chance to see a rise during that time where I was able to mesh music with the gaming space. And from that, you started to see moments like Travis Scott in Fortnite, Lil Nas X in Roblox, Post Malone in Pokemon, BB Rexa in Sims, and Ariana Grande in Rift Tour inside of Fortnite. So we meshed everything that we had done previously and kind of brought it into this gaming space. So when you ask about the origin story, it begins long before I stepped into gaming, kind of learning disciplines in other spaces and bringing that expertise to the gaming space. And I look forward to telling you so much more about what we're doing, both in the production space and the Web3 space.
Wow.
Yeah, so let's turn to that now, right? Because I think some of the content that you guys have created is so future facing by mashing up, and I didn't realize you guys were the Travis Scott Fortnite collab, yes. Which was super hot. So by bringing together these various different verticals and meshing them up in the content space is in and of itself disruptive. Yes. But what are you doing specifically with the content that's disruptive? So you were alluding to that a bit, like, are you producing it in a different way? How are you leveraging some of the open AI stuff and Web3 stuff that's out there right now in content creation?
Yeah, so I think that disruption happens in a couple different ways. It's identifying the obvious, right? So there's moments that we identified the obvious and created a lane that did not exist. So Tiffany, I'll ask you a question. You go watch a movie, blockbuster movie, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Prior to that movie starting, there's trailers. I often ask people, have you ever seen a video game trailer in those movie trailers? In most cases, people say, no, I've never seen that. And if they do say no, then I ask them, why not? Well, what we ended up doing was we called Screen Vision and asked them why not. And they said, we honestly don't know. And I said, well, I want to own that category. That category now, so anytime you go into a movie theater and you watch a trailer and you see a video game air prior to the movie, that's actually coming through our studio, both from a production perspective and a placement.
Ant-Man video, when I went. Yeah, you guys had, so that was your trailer.
That was us.
The video game.
Yes, that was us. We're actually running a series of video games during that run. So we started during Spider-Man right out of the pandemic with Call of Duty and ran a series of, so it depends on which state you were in, which time you were in, but there's a rotation of video games that are running during those trailers, and it had never existed before. So would you call that disruption or just just kind of recognizing a white space, you know what I mean, and taking advantage of that white space? That's an example of just doing it through partnership, doing it through the Web3 space. A lot of people have not been following as closely, but Unreal Engine is coming out with a new Unreal Engine here very soon, Unreal 5, kind of identifying what that's going to look like. And I've had the pleasure of sharing with David some of our work behind the scenes of, Web3 right now looks very cartoonish / old Pac-Man, Donkey Kong stage of a video game, not actually realistic with true realism in every case. But what ends up happening when you start to see Web3 that's both in real time and that brings realism? So when you start to say, what does disruption look like? I would say to any parents that are on the panel or any parents that are listening, how has school itself changed since we were in school? It's the grading system has simply been on grades. And though Tiffany and Taylor may be incredibly competitive, and if I get a B, both of you ladies want an A because you want to beat me, not everybody's competitive that way. Not everybody sees reward in the grades. So how do you gamify school such that you actually create an element through Web3 where now there's greater ways to engage? Because we know that you either learn by listening, watching, or actually participating, right? But then what ends up happening when your reward system changes as well? So it's not just A through F. We're not condoning CDs or Fs around here, but not just A, when it's not just A through Fs, but when it's actually a reward where you just won a new pair of LeBron James because you got a B on that test, or you just got a new PS5 because you got an A for the semester, where there's actually tangible reward through gamification at the educational level nationally. Those are things that inspire children. When all of a sudden now I've got something, or my parents can't get this for me, but now all of a sudden I want it on my own because I just got A's. I want more A's because I want, that eliminates bullying. It addresses a lot. So when we start to talk about disruptive activity through Web3, those are things kind of lifting the hood. David has heard me do this before. If I lift the hood, just assume it's being done. It just hasn't been released yet. But just kind of lifting the hood of what's to come here in the very short future and how we are disrupting spaces that have been traditional and conformed for a long period of time, such that now we can get these kids excited about school again in ways that actually excite them. And that's where a gamer can understand that.
Exactly. And I never understood why school couldn't be fun and entertaining and a game, and sexy, like as sexy as sports, as sexy as entertainment. To that point, I'm in New York City right now because I'm going to be performing a show that I'm doing called Sexy Black Genius. Okay. And it's that same sort of mindset, like school should be fun, school should be exciting, school should be a game, and so should learning in general for our whole lifetime, right? Because it truly is a competitive advantage. So I'm trying to rebrand geekiness to something sexy.
Well, I think it's amazing, guys, because it's like having all this excellence. Dante, thank you shared how you're just bridging out culture and into the metaverse. It's so amazing. I want to bring in another guest, Tavonia Evans here. And I want to do this in talking about innovation in the digital crypto world. So it's my pleasure to introduce Tavonia Evans, who's an engineer, designer, data scientist, and a 4-time founder of companies, including GuapCoin and the Cowrie Corporation. Now, Tavonia, you're known as one of the few and outstanding women in crypto. People don't think of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology as a powerful tool for economic empowerment. So can you share the origin story of why and how you created GuapCoin and how it's meeting the needs of people in the community, in our community?
Well, people don't understand a lot of things about blockchain, which is why there's so much convolution. But for the fact that the people that it could help the most are not really aware and educated on the ways it could really help is a huge problem. But I started GuapCoin back in around 2016 because actually this was my second startup. My first startup was a company called Safe to Meet. And we were doing very well in terms of, VCs, everybody was loving us, this, that, and the third, but no one would give us money. And this honestly, throughout my whole career in tech, was the first time I ever ran into a money ceiling. I thought getting into tech, I wouldn't have to deal with those kind of things, to be like totally honest, right? But I was sadly mistaken. I even thought that, hey, I'm an engineer, I can build what I want, I know what I need, I don't even need to really pay anybody to do it. But I didn't understand the importance of scaling a company and going from the next level from an MVP to a full-blown company was going to take them actual millions they're not trying to give me. So short story, I went back to crypto because I was already introduced to crypto. But when I was introduced to crypto, it wasn't introduced to me as money. It was introduced to me as this, just another technology, another geeks thing, and I had a whole lot of geek things already in my arsenal. So I was like, whatever. But when I realized at that point that it was money, I was like, okay, this is a game changer here. And I especially saw a lot of my colleagues raising funds for their tech companies using, crypto and blockchain. And I was like, hold on, wait a minute. So we can create our own money, And that was something that I looked into earlier as well. I figured out a long time ago, that's what Black folks need. We need to create our own money, especially in America. We need to have our own currency, right? But that was impossible at that time because the idea of currency was connected to commodities, like, it's got to be backed by gold, silver, or whatever. And we don't have that neither, right? So that's not going to help us. But when I saw that blockchain was creating the opportunity to create this whole new financial ecosystem that's built on technology, I was like, hold on, yeah, this is right up my alley. Come on, let me do this. So I jumped in and I created GuapCoin. And there are so many visions that I saw out of GuapCoin, not just cryptocurrency. One of the big things, as being a person in data, I saw data, right? And how important financial data is. Financial data, and data is another currency, but financial data is another huge currency. And neither one of them we don't own. But this is our opportunity to not only set up the rails for our own financial ecosystem, but to own our own data and be able to take and utilize our financial data in ways that other people use financial data, which is to grow and expand their businesses and to identify risks and to see where money really needs to go and how it's really doing in here, wherever, and to bring transparency into business, using data. I was like, no brainer. This is the solution to many of our problems economically. So let's do it. And that's why I created WalkCoin, and that's why I built that blockchain. It's not that I want to be a segregationist per se, but I want to address the faulty values and financial issues that we have in our community from the inside out rather than from the outside in. Because from the outside in, we don't even have a window into what, where, why, and how that happens. But from the inside out, we can actually see it in real time. And that's what blockchain would allow us to do, is to have that transparency, to see our money function, how it functions, where it's functioning, and to have greater control over our dollar.
Wow, that's really powerful and so important, as you said, because literally there's an opportunity to change the whole landscape by creating our own money, which you've done, and leveraging that to do things outside of the digital world and in the real world and solve some of those funding issues. Bentley, we've just heard of two areas in the digital space where necessity, curiosity, and cutting-edge technology are transforming media, the metaverse, and the startup world. But there's another space that we should talk about, which are the ecosystems and the communities and the highway, the on-ramp, right, for starting these businesses, which Bentley Charlemagne is addressing with Q Me Spotlight, Bentley?
Q Me Spotlight ecosystem, yeah.
Yeah, can you tell us more about these ecosystems and how you all are helping to enable the next generation of entrepreneurs?
Awesome. Thanks for having me on this call. I'll start off by saying we are the non-sexy space. I'm hearing a lot about Dante talking about the sexy space, which I would love to be in, but for us, the things we set out to do, I would call it the non-sexy space. Just listening to the conversation, amazing how Dante talked about the white space, identifying the white space and realizing where you can add value. And Tavania talking about the idea of creating your and managing your own data, how important that is. The genesis of QME Spotlight ecosystem really started around identifying some of those same issues. QME had been an agency in the marketing, branding, and manufacturing space for about 15 years by that time. I kind of was this kid who grew up in the Caribbean, moved to the US, and subsequently started my own agency. And I kind of have always been a solution kind of driven person. If I love to solve problems. And I had an opportunity to expand the agency into a full digital agency. And that is where ecosystem gave birth. As a small business, being certified across every certification you could think about, we realized it propelled us to the top of the food chain very quickly, working with Fortune 500 companies. But in talking to some of those communities, we realized there was challenges for a lot of the small businesses, and they'll keep asking me, how could you solve some of those problems? And because we were in the middle of it, we set out to solve those things with ecosystems. So we started developing an ecosystem that is really focused around core challenges, listening to the client, the pain points, what they wanted to solve. And we would build this ecosystem by aggregating everything that each particular ecosystem would need to drive and grow those ecosystems. So that is what kind of gave birth to the whole ecosystem space. Fast forward, we've built ecosystems across the fintech space, across the news and media space. Actually, the platform we're on today was built by QME Spotlight Ecosystem, the BIPOC exchange. Same type of scenario. David came to me and said, Bentley, we need to solve this issue around media, making media more equitable for in the BIPOC space. How can we create technology that brings this together? And literally, David just said, I don't know where to go with this. That's not my space. Here's the keys. Go do your thing. Come back. So we came back, I think about 6 weeks later, with a concept for David. And he said, man, I asked you for a Honda. You gave me a Lamborghini. So that was the birth of the relationship with BIPOC. Fast forward, BIPOC has set out to solve a lot of the issues across the BIPOC space. Subsequently to building BIPOC, a group from Philadelphia came to us and said, we are having challenges building a ramp to give access to capital to small businesses. And there was a network of CDFI that really wanted to kind of figure out how can you assess more minority small businesses, guide them through a process, give them a McKinsey-like report, all in the digital space that would then assess the company and even match banks and CDFIs and financial investors that can give these small businesses capital. So we set out and we built the first environment called the Biz Scoreline, that is a hybrid between a fintech and a small business assessment environment. And today, pre-launch, the beautiful thing that happened for that organization was pre-launch, there was awarded 2 large contracts, one from the city of Philadelphia, and several other bank partners have jumped on and have given them 7-figure funding to be able to assess these small businesses. And we are able to do that at a fraction of the cost of what some of your big agencies, like your big 5 agencies out there, I don't want to throw out names, and do that cost effectively for a small business. And that can happen within a period of an hour instead of the typical amount of time that takes 6 weeks to 8 weeks to really go through a company and assess them. So these are the things we are doing that is disruptive in the marketplace, including we've built a rail now that is going to drive trade between the US and Africa, connecting all 45 countries across Africa to be able to do business with the US, and many other things that we're doing in an ecosystem space today.
Thank you so much, Bentley. And we think the BIPOC exchange is very sexy, and BIPOC Media owes you a lot. Now, we've heard from 3 innovating founders who are already leading the way in the future, but they could not have done so without the people who came before them. The first technologists and inventors to break down the barriers and disrupt the spaces in innovations, including the internet. To tell us about the history that has paved the way into the future is business, finance, and tech expert Albert E. White, who over the course of over 30 plus years has been CEO of 2 energy companies. He's been a senior manager for several technology companies and is an advisor to some of the most successful CEOs in the country. Albert's book, Race for the Net, When African Americans Control the Internet and What Happens Now charts the story of Net Solutions, a Black technology company that played a pivotal role in creating the internet. And it breaks down how we got here today. Albert, it's an honor to have you join us. Can you tell us the idea behind your book and why you felt it was necessary to write it? What doesn't society know and accept about the many early contributors of African Americans and people of color in the creation of the technologies that people use so readily today? Not just Black people, but everyone.
You on mute, Albert.
I'm sitting here in amazement, listening to these bright people. Okay, so I'm going to take a poll here. How many of you online knew that the distribution of the internet 30 years ago was by an African American company? And that answers the question. So the original company that distributed the internet and internet addresses and domain names, as you know it today, was a company called Network Solutions, which exists today, right? That company was an African-American company, formed in Herndon, Virginia in 1979 by Emmett McHenry, Ty Grisby, Gary Dessler, and Ed Peters. It's an interesting story. I had to write the book for a number of reasons. One, I was directly involved in the introduction back then called the Information Superhighway, of telling people that there was a new technology coming and that you should watch it and it's going to be disruptive and everything. And people would just ignore me. They would say, it can't be, you know, and I would give them some of the attributes of the technology, that they'd be able to order stuff online from their home. You wouldn't need the libraries. And they said, no, that's not going to happen. So this is, let's talk years. That was, say, 1993. This is the 30th anniversary of the launching of the internet to a global audience. So Network Solutions won a contract with the National Science Foundation, which controlled the internet in the early days with the Defense Department, to basically provide internet access to the world. And what that meant was we were the first to start issuing domain names and internet addresses around the world. A lot of people didn't know there was a Black firm doing that. During the competition for this contract, we were the only bidders. And the reason we were the only bidders is that we were the ones that developed the platform for the Defense Department for the internet. And so there was nobody else that had that capability. The interesting thing, and Dave and I have kind of talked about this, is that there has not been wide recognition of the accomplishment of African Americans in the internet space. The company itself was sold in 1995, and it was sold at a very low price. And it's because of the traditional questions of how Black people get capital. We could not raise capital, even though we had this premier position in the world. A lot of people kept saying to us, well, we don't know where the internet's going. We talked to Bob Johnson. He says, you know, if it's that important, why do they give it to Black people? You know, so the company was sold for $5 million in 1995. In the year 2000, during the dot-com boom, the company sold for $21 billion, the largest sale of any technology company ever. And you shake your head and you talk about that. But that's how, you know, historically, that's been our tradition, that we develop something, put it out there, we can't get funding, and then somebody else benefits from it, right? So that was the reason, David, I wrote the book. I wanted our community and other communities to know that African Americans played a major role in the initial launch of the internet. Nobody had that, no corporation, no entity in the world was requested to distribute internet addresses. I was also curious about what would be said in the future to our grandkids and our kids about the internet, you know, because it's changed everything. And so what I did was in the book, I give the history of network solutions, as well as the story about how they sold it so early. But also I give a roadmap on what businesses people should be looking for in the digital space. And you guys have just gone beyond my discussion, but there are some areas that I talk about in the digital space. In the early days of the internet, I was trying to get a number of African-American companies involved in the internet because I thought that it would be an opportunity for them to get on the bandwagon before it really kind of developed. And you know, I look back at, you know, Jeff Bezos and some of the other early trailblazers, and Jeff Bezos just believed in the technology and was able to get the money. You see, in the year 2000, he lost $300 million trying to basically launch his internet platform through books and other things. But the difference between Jeff Bezos and the average Black person is he lost $300 million, but was able to get more money to basically go and launch it even after that failure, right? We couldn't have gotten money like that. So I talk in the book about, you know, Bezos, and I talk about the families. I talk about why we need to support our families, our friends, when it comes to capital. You know, one of the biggest problems, I'm sure all of you have faced this, is that, you know, I get people coming to me all the time. They say, Al, I cannot get people in my own family to back my project. They're very negative about what I'm trying to do as an entrepreneur. You know, certain families, you know, you have a situation where somebody's been an entrepreneur and they understand what you're trying to do, but getting them to write a check. So in the book, I talk about how you deal with that question with a relative or friend, and give them like 10 or 15 questions they can kind of, you know, ask and things going forward. So David, I went through that, I've done that. I worked for Dr. Lonnie Johnson, the inventor of the Super Soaker Water Gun, for 21 years. I ran his 2 energy companies. I've worked with Reggie Lewis when I was at Inner City Broadcasting in New York with the radio stations. I've worked with in Philadelphia. I've worked around the country, mainly in the infrastructure and mainly in areas dealing with building something, okay? And you guys are building, and I'm really impressed. So my real focus today, I'm an advisor on a fairly large venture fund, and we only invest in minority firms, established minority firms. I'm really, really big on how we approach these new technologies, especially in the EV industry space. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for our community to capture the space, but we got to be trained. We got to, you know, we have to know what's going on, because it's a space that's going to be even bigger than the internet. So we're talking about, you know, automobiles and stuff. So I'm pushing that. I'm looking right now at an acquisition of a fairly large training company that could put their capability into HBCUs. And so that's what's really been fostering a lot of the stuff I'm doing today. Everybody's asking me about the second book. I'm not really right now thinking about a second book, but I am so impressed by you guys. I have adult children. My son, who you might have seen on TV, Chris White, is the #1 specialist in corporate bonds. He just raised about $20 million in Europe to basically promote a platform and data where he provides data to a lot of bond traders. He has a training program with his older sister, and they just received a grant from the Milken Foundation to continue training young men, young women in the finance space who may not have the money to basically go and get a master's degree or get another degree and stuff. So very proud of them. And I'm, you know, I'm great. David, this was like incredible to hear all these things. You know, back then, if I had had you guys back then, we'd be, you know, we would be meta today. You know what I mean? we would have killed this. And but I'm glad that we're in the space. and we're working together. That's the big thing. We need to work together to basically provide this. Now, hopefully we can kind of get to the next level. I think we're at the next level. When people ask me today what I think about metaverse, and I say, okay, we're getting ready to go to that next level, you know. And I think there's a lot more. AI right now is going crazy. I think there's some AI applications that, you know, they're just unbelievable to me, that I'm sure you guys have seen, from the finance space to the writing space to the art space. So we just need to continue pressing on and continue thinking about new ways that people want to buy things. That's where it comes down to.
Albert, man, thank you for sharing your wisdom. Hopefully you can stick around as we continue this discussion. I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany to take us into the next segment. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have to say thank you to Albert too, because we obviously were coming up around the same time. And so I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the stories that you're telling. We probably have to catch up at some point on Syncom Ventures. You
Right.
probably know Terry and
Know
them.
Terry well.
Yeah, unfortunately passed away, but it's a common story, right? Like the current generations think they're the first. The past generations' stories are not told until after they're dead, and so then we lose the benefit of that relay race handoff of knowledge and experience. I'll say, as a Black female tech entrepreneur, I raised more money than anyone for a startup ever, like 700 million for the satellite radio startups. And even with all we've done and the impact, every time I do a startup, and I've now impacted billions of people around the world, I still have to start like at the very beginning as if I've done nothing. But my male counterparts that came, so I was an original space entrepreneur, you know,
Okay,
that came behind me, get the benefit of the doubt, even if it's a loss. I was in the room when Bezos was first talking about Amazon back in the 90s. So I'm really excited to hand it all over to Taylor now, Taylor James of The Plug. I'm in love with the whole idea that The Plug exists as a Black female tech leader, having another Black female launch this type of platform and this content and these publications. I mean, I don't even know the full term for it, because you guys are reaching out in so many different spaces of influence, including I subscribe to your LinkedIn newsletter, you know, and I'll say, as a 55-year-old Black female tech entrepreneur, it's important. I was totally alone, and trying to both advocate and pull people along and tell the stories, like a Syncom story, like, you know, Blacks were behind, Black and brown people were behind satellite radio, invested in MP3 and all that stuff. And so Taylor, as the head of research, the director of research for The Plug, just finished a report called the Black Tech Effect Report. And she's going to share with us today a few of the findings and how we can use it as a roadmap for the future.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. So glad to be here amongst some amazing people. Love hearing about what everyone is doing, and it's so relevant to the work that we're doing at The Plug. The Plug is a digital and insights firm that focuses on presenting the Black and brown tech innovation, highlighting different founders, different organizations. We have an HBCU arm. I am a HBCU grad. I went to the Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. So I love everything about HBCUs and just the foundation that they set for the Black economy. The Black Tech Effect was a report that our inaugural report that we decided to put out just to highlight and celebrate 100 Black founders that are creating systems and solutions to address different disparities or different issues within our country, within our world, and give them their flowers and celebrate with them and all of their accomplishments. Because as we know, we don't always get to know some of the things that we're doing in our community. Clearly, I've learned a lot, you know, in the last 45 minutes that I've been on the call, things that I did not know, and I'm going to do a little bit more research when I get off to learn more about some of the great works that we're doing. And so we wanted to really highlight and share what these founders are doing and just some of the areas that they're in, the verticals that they're in. We have a whole section of companies that are creating work within the social impact space. They're in EV, they're in climate change, things that you don't typically hear about, especially within our Black community. And they're creating these systems and solutions to really address some of those issues. And so we wanted to highlight them. As we know, as it's been discussed, Black professional or Black startups and founders, don't get the same level of support, whether that's fundraising or consumers or whatever the case may be. And so these founders are pushing beyond the limitations and barriers and really just putting themselves out there and putting out these products. And so wanting to celebrate and highlight them and making sure they got their recognition. One of the important things about it, we highlighted 100, but there's thousands. We have a master list of thousands of Black tech founders that are in so many different spaces, and it was hard to narrow down. We created this methodology around how we are going to select these 100. And because we know that our most lists are based off of like financial, who has the highest valuation. And because of the limitations that we get as far as like funding, we wanted to ensure that we were able to create our own kind of scorecard. And so we added a social impact score to show that success is not always based off of valuation. It's also based off of social impact, doing good in the community and addressing issues that impact us. And with that, we were able to truly highlight some of those who are doing the work, whether that's in nonprofit, whether that's in climate change, whether that's in fintech, health tech, things that are addressing in issues that we're having in our community. They are creating these wonderful products, and we wanted to really highlight them and celebrate them.
Yeah, so I love what the plug is doing to just dispel this trope around Black tech inferiority.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you about another report that the plug has done, I think related, State of the Pledge, looking at sort of a lot of the commitments that the tech sector have made to not just to Black tech founders, but also to social causes in general. Any updates or what's going on there? Anything you could share with us? What's latest from that report?
Yes. So we partnered with the Blacks in Technology Foundation to create this report back in 2020 after the death of George Floyd, which went viral. A lot of companies, especially tech companies, made these huge commitments and pledges on ways that they're going to either support Black and Brown employees, the Black and Brown community, the Black and Brown ecosystem. And they were extreme pledges, whether that's financial commitments, whether that's to increase their Black workforce population, whether that's to provide resources for specific organizations. And so our CEO, Sherelle Dorsey, created this spreadsheet that went viral, just listing all of the companies that made this commitment. And it was over 200 companies who made these commitments, either by their CEO or their marketing team, whoever, someone made a commitment. And so we were able to use that as a baseline. And 2 years later, we wanted to track to see where they were on those commitments. If they, was it just to make sure that they did not get, in trouble? Because, we were all watching. Everyone was watching to see who was making commitments and what the commitments were. And so there was no type of tracking system to ensure that they were actually making these commitments or that they were sticking to their commitments. So this was our opportunity to really hold them accountable and wanting to ensure that they lived up to what their commitments were. And some of them did. Some of them are on the trajectory of either reaching their financial goal or exceeding their financial goal or increasing their workforce population. Some of them haven't. And this was our job and our responsibility to really put that out there and identify who's doing the work and who isn't. And not to bring negativity to them, but just to show them and tell them, hey, all eyes are on you. We're watching you and we want to hold you accountable. This is about accountability. Stick to your word and make sure that you are living up to what you're doing. And this is not just something that you can do to get us off of your back. So that was something that we did. We released it, got a lot of feedback, positive feedback from consumers thanking us for doing it. But we also had companies contacting us and upset because we held them accountable to what they committed to. And so we will continue to release these types of reports to track where they are. And the disappointing thing is everyone knows that there have been massive layoffs within the tech industry over the last, 2 quarters. It started, I believe, in 3Q. And just this year alone, we're still in February. March is on Wednesday. We have experienced over 100,000 people that have lost their jobs. Guess which arm of the industry has been impacted the most? The DEI teams have been cut, the HR teams. Those are the teams that really grew after those commitments were made. And so and now they're the first ones to be cut. And so as these companies are starting to really switch their priorities of where they are, the areas that they brought in to really increase their awareness and their support around Black and Brown founders, Black and Brown employees, Black and Brown community. Now that's the first thing to be cut, and that's a problem.
Yeah, thank you so much, Taylor, for that perspective. And, it is a challenge. It goes back to agency and ownership. And the next time we have a window that opens, unfortunate window like George Floyd, it's like, how can we leverage that more for agency and ownership? Because it's hard. It's just like what we're seeing with people renting places versus all the help for people that own their homes to stay in. But the research and all that you all are doing, incredibly insightful. And I want to ask actually Tavonia some of her thoughts on the trends that are facing the industry as well, because Taylor just gave us this sort of picture from a research perspective, which was very insightful. Tavonia, what are you seeing as future trends from a applied perspective, actually being out there, and how might we leverage blockchain in some creative ways to address some of these trends?
Well, definitely, I think the biggest trend that's facing people right now, and it's actually worrying people out there, it doesn't worry me because I'm actually in the space, but AI, of course, artificial intelligence is probably the biggest thing right now that has people kind of shaking in their boots. So like, okay, we finally now have the technology that, but we have the technology, but what people fail to realize is we don't quite yet have the power source, which is what they're working on with nuclear fission and fusion and stuff like that. But we don't quite have the power source yet, but we're getting there. But we have the technology. So a lot of people are worried about AI. That's been the biggest thing in the last 4 months. Is it going to eliminate my job? It's likely yes. Every question is yes, it's going to take away my job. It's not a question. People are assuming, so yes, it's going to take away my job. It's going to do this, it's going to do that. But that's why it's actually even more important that we educate more people in our community to understand that one thing goes away, 10 things spring up. And we now have the opportunity to be on the forefront of those new things that are springing up. But we don't have to miss the boat on this, so we are, even me personally, I'm like scattered now because I'm not just with GuapCoin, I'm also in the metaverse and also launching a bank, but I also educate. And that's like my primary concern. And I'm split because I'm like, oh gosh, people really need to be up to speed on what's going on so they don't feel a sense of hopelessness with these changes, and instead they welcome them and see opportunity. Because us on the tech side, of course, we always see opportunity and we get excited and we get, ecstatic, but everybody on the streets, they see, this is disaster coming,
So
and of course,
what are some of the areas of opportunity that you see that we can maybe translate to people in the street?
Well, artificial intelligence, I think, is a boom to small business, right? Because small business lacking capital needs help. And artificial intelligence is the quick help that small business can use to boom. Point blank. We can't afford, in small business, we can't afford access to these resources that they've already had access to for years. So now this is public access that we have access to, that we can use to grow our small businesses in ways and make our small businesses more efficient, because, in a small business, we have one person that's doing everything, So now we get to, we're going to have more tools, and we're going to have more automation that's going to help us to run our company, run our small business like it's a big business, and create less access to the CEO who's doing this, that, and that, when the CEO needs to be doing the CEO things, So I think that in this age, number one, where they said Black women are starting businesses at a rate of 3 to 1 to everybody else, now they yet have another tool to now scale their business at a rate faster than anybody else. So can you imagine where these business owners are going to be, or where they could be in the next 2 to 3 years? Because now that not only they're starting businesses, now they're able to scale their business, right? So this is like very, very important. But again, there's, just like blockchain, there's a lot of mixed signals and FUD education out there. You know what I mean? It's just not whatever. So it takes people who are on the inside to stop what we're doing, because we want to participate and take advantage of all this greatness too. But then we also have to stop what we're doing and get out on the streets and educate the people and let them know, to say, hey, it's not like what you think. This is the opportunity, this is the help that you've been asking for, that you need. So we need to create more opportunities amongst our people, utilizing the opportunities that are here. So the education piece is huge right now with that.
Yeah. So let me
And
bring
I think
in,
it's even
Doug.
a matter of exposure, right? Because our genius is strong. So a lot of times, if people are just given the space to be exposed to, for example, Chat GPT, they'll pick it up pretty quickly. Like, so everyone have your open AI, like, happy hour parties where you're playing a YouTube video and having a glass of rosé.
I've already built 3 apps using utilizing the OpenAI
Chat
API.
GPT.
Yeah, I've built 3 apps using the API, and there's more I want to build. So I'm like, and it's just, it's so much opportunity. Like, I just want to scream it from the mountaintops, like, you utilize this opportunity now, because you're right. We our creativity, at this point, creativity and the usage of, that's what's needed right now. Okay, like the application of it, not so much the technology, but how can we apply this? How can we solve this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem? And we already have these solutions in our head. We just didn't, a lot of people out there, they just didn't know how to implement those solutions. Well, guess what? AI can fill that implementation of those solutions for you.
But I love this. So, man, we could go on forever. I want to bring in Bentley and Dante into this, and around this question about sort of, as your space in digital ecosystems, and also in your space of just the convergence of tech, media, gaming in the metaverse. How do you see this creating sort of opportunities or spaces where other Black tech founders can emerge and have opportunities? First you, Bentley, and then I'd love to get your perspective as well, Dante.
Again, exciting, right? In the Chat GTP AI space, we are looking at that now, and the big word, one of my colleagues, Luna X agency, who works very closely with us, we sit down and we create these strategies when we are creating an ecosystem around a particular issue. And we always talk about what else can we tie around what we are doing to enhance. So we see a huge amount of ways. I think Tavania was touching on that when you can understand how to utilize these type of tools, you can drive X10 enhancement but you have to know how to use it well. I think if the piece is really about education, how do you utilize these tools not just the way everyone else is using it, but create new and innovative ways to then take that tool and include it into your technology in a non-traditional way. That is really where we see we can use this. We are starting to really look at, okay, everyone is using it this way, but what else can we do with that? We did a use case with ChatGPT recently that took a company from Australia we were working with, where we developed social media content and utilizing that. And we helped these guys grow within the past 15 months to about $35-40 million company from zero. So there's ways we are starting to wrap this type of technology. We see the ecosystem can be a huge space that can utilize AI integration. Again, not to cannibalize the core system, but to drive enhancement in particular areas. So it's an exciting space.
Dante?
Yep, I know I've got 60 seconds or less, so I will keep this incredibly tight and very simple. Culture is led by creativity. Creativity creates community. All of that, when utilizing the efficiencies of AI, whether it's through your chat or your open, when using your AI to, and Tavonia was great in saying small business efficiencies, but I would almost say business efficiencies across the board, creating that community, which everyone is trying to do. That's why everybody's running to gaming. They're running to social media. They understand influencers and influential people in these spaces. When you're using AI to connect all of that, the benefit for brands is community. And if you are already an AI expert and you're wondering, okay, I get all of that, where else can I step? Politicians are really going to need your help to manage this whole thing from a political perspective, legalities within a brand new, open front of AI, and what does that look like? And see, I'm getting a second from Tavonia. She knows that to be fact.
Yeah, I'm running for Congress, so I had to say that. So yeah,
absolutely. Then yes, that they're going to need it. It's a wild, wild west, if it's allowed to be. So if you are an expert in the space, there's obviously a space for your influence with politicians. If you're new to the space, think of the expertise that you've received on social with building communities, and utilize AI to do that same thing. And that is it, David. I'll hand it back over to you, my friend.
No, I love it. So Tiffany, we're out of time, but I'm going to use my privilege because I have to get your reflection on what's next. And what do you think, your perspective on this question?
Was that for me? Oh.
No, but Tiffany, I'm sorry.
First off, I do want to say thank you for pulling this all together, because we're near the end, and thank you to all the participants. I will definitely connect with each of you individually, because part of the nature of the beast is that we are so fragmented as a community, even being within the tech community. For me, a lot of the future is around the metaverse. I have a metaverse company in the sports space. And to the point that everyone has made, every single job that is in what I call analog reality, like our regular reality, will exist in the metaverse reality. And it's just an open slate. So we create the first digital sports league in the metaverse with SimWin Sports. We just launched American Football League. I was at the Super Bowl a few weeks ago. So, from a gaming and tech perspective, everyone's thinking about the game, but also the red carpet exists outside of the metaverse stadium. We have a lot of personalities that are becoming like metaverse sports commentators. And yes, that is a real job in real business. And if you look at Tom Brady, who's going to get $37.x million a year for 10 years to speak about football, you can actually make quite a bit of money off that. So I think a lot of stuff with Web3 and the replication of everything that exists in the real world on to the metaverse. And the metaverse is not just about virtual reality, although Meta would like for you to think that is. It's about creating the meta reality. I also think a lot of the future is going to be around the answer to this question: what does it mean to be human? I think as we go forth, we're going to reimagine what the human experience means, and and to what extent we can integrate low tech all the way to mid tech to high tech into our bodies and still be considered a human being. And so I find myself fascinated by that question. And then the application of blockchain around distributed truth. So in particular, I'm looking at intellectual property and invention. There's a lot going on in the IP space. I advise, especially Taylor and the plug, to stay on top of that because there's a whole movement trying to dismantle intellectual property. What, people who cure cancer should have part-time jobs to pay for their rent? I think a lot of it is partly driven by the diversity of women and Blacks and Browns getting more and more into this IP space and people not wanting to pay for our genius. So please definitely look into that. I'm very active with it, but I'd love to have more Black and Brown people supporting intellectual property rights. And I'll stop there.
Well, thank you so much, Tiffany, for all your brilliance. It was amazing being in this discussion with you and these amazing visionaries on the panel. Tavonia, Dante, Bentley, Albert, and Taylor, you are all in the driver's seat of the future, completely dispelling that myth of Black tech inferiority. So I thank you all, and I thank everyone that joined us. Bye-bye.